Pay attention to these two people captured in this security footage. The woman, standing just outside room 19, is Rachel Moore, a 36-year-old widow. The man opening the door, visibly startled, is Ethan Cole, 29. In less than 3 minutes, one of them will be dead. The other will be standing in the rain, waiting for police to arrive. At first glance, this looks like an act of vengeance. But what happened in this hallway wasn't driven by rage alone. It was the final collapse of a woman who had spent months chasing justice that never came. "You took everything from me," she says. Ethan's reply is lost under the thunder that follows. Moments later, a flash lights the frame, then silence. At 10:47 p.m., the Joliet Police Department received multiple 911 calls from guests at the Interstate Motel off Route 30. The first caller, a truck driver parked outside room 17, reported hearing a single gunshot followed by a woman crying. Within 4 minutes, officers arrived on scene. Room 19's door was ajar. Inside, they found 29-year-old Ethan Cole on the floor, unresponsive, and Rachel Moore sitting beside the bed, gun placed neatly on the nightstand. She made no attempt to run. When officers entered, she simply looked up and said, "I waited for you." What began as a quiet summer night on the outskirts of Joliet would soon unravel into a story of grief, obsession, and moral ruin. Before the headlines, before the motel and the gun, Rachel Moore's life was ordinary and full. She lived with her husband Daniel in a modest 2-bedroom home in the suburbs of Aurora, Illinois. He worked nights as a delivery driver. She taught art at a local middle school. Together for 8 years, their life was quiet, rhythmic, and real. Until one Friday in late October when a simple stop at a gas station changed everything. At 11:22 p.m., Daniel Moore walked into a Quick Mart on his route home. Security footage later showed another man entering seconds later, hood up, face obscured, carrying a silver handgun. 31 seconds later, that same man ran out with $86 in cash. Daniel never made it home. The shooter, Ethan Cole, was arrested the next morning after pawning the weapon in downtown Joliet. Police found his fingerprints, his confession, and a motive rooted in addiction. But when the case reached trial, a procedural error in the evidence chain rendered his confession inadmissible. Ethan Cole walked out of court a free man. Rachel watched from the gallery as he smiled, shook his attorney's hand, and left. In the months that followed, Rachel's grief hardened into disbelief. She sent letters to the district attorney, called reporters, and begged for an appeal that never came. The world moved on, but she didn't. In a box beneath her bed, she kept everything that was left of her husband. His wallet, his work badge, and the photo ID police returned with blood still on it. By spring, Rachel had lost her job. By summer, she had lost herself. The man who killed her husband walked out of court a free man on March 4th, 2024. The official reason, mishandled evidence and a faulty warrant. The unofficial one, human error. To Rachel Moore, that error wasn't just procedural. It was a betrayal. The system that promised justice had given her silence instead. When reporters asked the district attorney for comment, he called the dismissal a technical setback. Rachel replayed that phrase over and over. Technical setback. Her husband was dead, and the man responsible was home posting photos of his new motorcycle. In the weeks that followed, Rachel's life began to fold in on itself. She stopped answering calls from family, stopped showing up for work. Her house, once filled with paintings and music, became silent. Each night, she opened her laptop and searched his name, Ethan Cole. Social media offered breadcrumbs. A new profile under a fake last name, a different town, a new life. He wasn't hiding. He was flaunting his freedom. Photos of bars, cars, women. Each post another reminder of what he still had and what she had lost. By May, Rachel had started keeping notes. A spiral notebook filled with dates, times, and screenshots. Every check-in, every post, every location tag. To anyone else, it was meaningless data. To Rachel, it was a map. One post in particular changed everything. A short video of Ethan outside a roadside motel on Route 30. He was laughing, holding up a beer, captioned, "Back to the grind." The post was tagged Joliet. That was the moment grief turned into direction. For the first time in months, she wasn't crying. She was planning. By late May, Rachel Moore's world had narrowed to one objective: find Ethan Cole. She no longer checked the weather, her email, or the news. She only checked his posts. Using the fragments of information she gathered online, Timestamps, backgrounds, road signs reflected in mirrors. She built a pattern. Cole was staying in small motels along the highway that connected Aurora to Joliet, working odd construction jobs, never in one place for long. Friends later told investigators that by June, Rachel had all but vanished. She ignored calls, stopped paying bills, and never answered the door. The few times her sister visited, she claimed Rachel's house felt like a time capsule, as if she'd frozen her life at the moment Daniel died. In her basement, detectives would later find a corkboard covered in photographs, Ethan's social posts, receipts, satellite maps, even printed security footage she'd requested through Freedom of Information forms. The woman who once taught art to middle schoolers had become an amateur investigator with the precision of a detective and the desperation of a grieving widow. On June 9th, Rachel drove 60 miles south to Joliet. Her car's dashcam, later recovered by police, recorded hours of empty highway, a reflection of her single-minded purpose. She spent that night in her car, parked across from the Interstate Motel, the same one from Ethan's tagged post. The footage shows her watching room 19 through the rain. For 2 nights she observed, documenting every arrival, every light that turned off, every time Ethan stepped out to smoke. She wasn't just watching him, she was studying him. She returned home briefly the following week, cleared her voicemail, paid 1 overdue bill, and withdrew $600 in cash. Then she drove south again. On the backseat of her car sat the same duffel bag she'd used during her honeymoon. Inside, the revolver, a change of clothes, and a folded photograph of Daniel, the one taken the day before he died. By the end of June, Ethan Cole had become more than the man who took her husband's life. He was the embodiment of everything she believed the world had allowed to survive unchecked. Rachel Moore wasn't planning to flee. She was planning to finish what the courts refused to start. Absolutely. This is the pivotal scene, the emotional and moral breaking point that everything has been building toward. It mirrors Final Moments' confrontation style, tense, minimal, and chillingly calm. Facts delivered like a crime report, not a drama. At 10:44 p.m. on July 8, 2024, Rachel Moore parked her car across the street from the Interstate Motel. Security cameras captured her crossing the lot, umbrella in one hand, a small black duffel bag in the other. The timestamp on the footage read 10 hours, 46 minutes, and 12 seconds. Inside the bag was a loaded .38 revolver and a single photograph of her husband. According to police, Ethan Cole had been living in that room for nearly 2 months. He had no idea she was coming. At 10 hours, 47 minutes, and 6 seconds, the camera outside room 19 captures the door opening. Ethan appears in a t-shirt and jeans, surprised but not alarmed. "Rachel, what the hell? Do you even remember his name?" He takes a step back, confusion turning into fear as Rachel raises the revolver. Witnesses later told detectives they heard a woman crying, followed by muffled shouting. "It wasn't supposed to go that way. I didn't mean—" "You had a choice. You walked away." Rachel's hand trembles. The CCTV camera catches her shifting her grip, the reflection of the hallway light flashing off the weapon. For 8 full seconds, neither of them move. Then Ethan makes a mistake. He reaches for his phone on the nightstand. The sound triggered 5 separate 911 calls. When police arrived less than 4 minutes later, they found Ethan Cole lying near the door and Rachel Moore sitting beside the bed staring at the wall. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" He said he didn't mean to. She placed the revolver on the nightstand and waited to be arrested. There was no struggle, no resistance, just quiet. For the detectives assigned to the case, the story seemed simple. A grieving widow who'd taken justice into her own hands. But when they checked Ethan Cole's phone, the simplicity of that narrative would begin to unravel. When officers entered room 19, Ethan Cole was already gone. The revolver lay on the nightstand beside an open wallet and a cell phone still recording. Rain dripped through the open door, blurring the edges of the scene. At 11:02 p.m., detectives secured the area and began logging evidence. On Cole's phone, they found a single voice memo saved less than an hour before the shooting. The recording lasted 42 seconds, just long enough to change everything they thought they knew. "I'm done with this, man. I ain't covering for you anymore. You said she'd get a payout, not die. If you call me again, I'm going to the cops." The second voice on the tape was never identified, but investigators recognized what it meant. Ethan Cole hadn't acted alone the night Daniel Moore was killed. The gas station robbery had been a setup, part of an insurance fraud scheme targeting delivery routes. In the weeks before the crime, Daniel Moore's company had increased policy coverage on its night drivers. The gunman's role was to stage a robbery, make it look random, trigger the payout, and split the money later. Daniel wasn't supposed to die. When he did, the operation buried the story and cut Ethan loose. But Rachel never learned any of it. By the time police connected the dots, she was already in custody, sitting in an interrogation room with the same blank expression she'd worn at the scene. "Why did you go there, Rachel?" "Because no one else would." She gave a full confession within an hour. No lawyer, no hesitation. When asked if she regretted it, she said quietly, "I regret being right about him." The district attorney charged her with second-degree murder. Given her cooperation and the circumstances, the court accepted a plea agreement. 20 years with eligibility for parole after 12. At sentencing, the judge described her actions as a tragedy born from institutional failure. Ethan Cole's recording was entered into evidence posthumously. It led to 3 arrests inside the trucking company, including a regional manager who later admitted to orchestrating the insurance fraud. But that truth came too late for Rachel Moore. In her final statement before being led away, she said, "If someone had listened when I begged them to look again, none of us would be here." The bullet she fired ended one life, but it exposed a chain of corruption that claimed many more. Justice came, just not for the one who needed it most. In the months that followed, Rachel Moore's case faded quietly from headlines. There were no documentaries, no interviews, no foundation set up in her husband's name. Just a few archived articles and a line in a sentencing report. Defendant expressed remorse for actions but maintains belief her actions revealed truth. Inside the Women's Correctional Facility in Dwight, Illinois, Rachel took a job in the library. She rarely spoke about what happened, but she often requested books on criminal law and ethics. One guard later told reporters she would read until lights out, then sit alone, staring at a photograph she kept in her locker. A smiling man in a blue work shirt. Outside, the world continued. The motel was sold and renovated. Room 19 no longer exists. Ethan Cole's name joined a list of unsolved cases connected to a larger fraud network, and the company responsible quietly settled its investigation for an undisclosed amount. But for Rachel, there was never a settlement, only a sentence. She had lost her husband, her freedom, and her faith in justice. All that remained was the truth, and the price she paid to find it. When justice failed her, she made her own. It doesn't end well.